happening this session. That's not me. That's all of you. That's the people sitting up here and others who aren't in this room who have been working so long and so hard to make meaningful changes and lay the foundation. And I feel like there's a lot of momentum. We are going to be passing meaningful legislation this year, and I believe we will have a significant appropriation to help demonstrate our state's commitment to victims and survivors of domestic violence, that we are committed to doing better. We understand that we need to be doing more. And I want to recognize my Uncle Kent over here, my cousin Mandy Maine's father, Kent Maine, who has been with me every step of this journey as we have gone throughout the state. We've visited with law enforcement agencies throughout the state. We have visited with judges, prosecutors, advocates. We have been all over trying to help bring awareness not only to the situation that my cousin Mandy found herself in, trying to figure out how best we can address it and why we have the holes we have and how we can go about plugging those holes and doing better for the victims of domestic violence in the state to prevent specifically intimate partner homicide. Has been our particular focus. Utah spends a lot of money on criminals. It's high time we spend more money on survivors and survivor services. This is something that law enforcement, I know, supports. They can't do it alone. They've got to have someone on the other end of that phone when they connect people on the scene to services. There has to be someone on the other end of that phone. Our administration has requested $50 million for victim service providers. This proposal, sponsored by Representative Ivory and supported by Representative Johnson, is critical to the needs in our state moving forward. We want law enforcement to be able to connect every victim with a trauma-trained advocate, and we owe it to Utahns to ensure someone is on the other end of that phone. I'm going to leave it to Representative Ryan Wilcox to talk specifically about the bill that we've been working on to address, as I mentioned earlier, specifically intimate partner homicide in this state. There's not one single thing that can be done to prevent this, but there are a lot of things we can and should be doing, and we are grateful for the support of those in this room who've been working for so long to take those steps. And I guess with that, we'll turn it over to Ryan to talk about Senate Bill 117.
Sorry if I mess up all those mics that just got, yeah. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to be here with you, Madam Lieutenant Governor. I think that was a good way to summarize that. It's something that we all have known about for a long time, but until we deal with it on a personal level, it changes that approach. So thank you for each of you for being here. You're obviously here for a reason. And a lot of that is because, not just that we're in session, but because we've been able to come to a place on several pieces of legislation that we really do think will help. All right? A lot of this is pretty meaningful. The LAP bill, which is, as we affectionately call it, Lethality Assessment Protocol. It's Senate Bill 117, will be heard in our House side today, on the fun side. In our House Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice Committee hearing this afternoon. I'd like to acknowledge and thank all of you who have contributed to that. We're furiously making a few adjustments right now due to your suggestions and advice, and that will strengthen the bill, right? And it will help make sure that we keep people safe in the long term. There are a handful of things that we come across on the Hill that we know will work. Most of the things are our best guess. Right? We try to make decisions based on good information and doing all the homework that we can, and then we try it. We know usually by March if the governor's going to sign, and by July if it was a bad idea after it goes into effect, and then we try to tweak it again. This isn't one of those things we're wondering about. This is one of those we have the data. We know it works when it's implemented and followed properly. So I need to acknowledge our law enforcement partners who have helped us provide that data by following through and showing and demonstrating that that works. It's so much easier as a lawmaker to be able to rely on consistent, demonstrated evidence when we're making policy. So thank you. I want to acknowledge several representatives who aren't here with us today, but who also have significant improvements. There are even some very small ones. You know, House Bill 225 makes some suggestions that came from the Department of Public Safety, but closes some of those loopholes for firearms for people that shouldn't have them, and will allow us to track those based on intimate partner violence, right? We have Representative Lisenby that's working on a piece that's very important. Representative Perucci's done that, Representative Birkland. There are several that have been focused on this, and it very much is a team effort in the House and the Senate. And I can't thank you all enough for your work on the ground side, because no matter what we pass here, it doesn't work without you. So if there are any specific questions about the LAP protocol, I'm happy to answer those. There'll be a few small changes today to make sure that we're as current as we can be with that. But that's, I think we're ready to go. So thank you for being here, and I'll pass it on to, I think it's Tom. Are you up next? All right, thanks, Tom.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. For those of you that don't know me, I came into the state government position as director of CCJJ from a 34-year law enforcement career in Bountiful. And when Jen reached out and asked if I would speak a little bit about the relationship with law enforcement and domestic violence advocates, what's the connection there, I was happy to do that. And I thought about it because the connection is very similar, but yet it's different. And what I've noticed over my career, and I actually saw it fairly early, is a lot of this connection came through the eyes of the victims that we were trying to serve and help. And let me give you a little bit of an understanding from a law enforcement side. I want to take you back. This was several years ago, early in my career, and I was sent on a domestic violence call. And as I arrived, I was there alone, which we are listening, trying to determine what's happening, waiting for backup. And I could hear a female screaming and crying inside. I heard something break. I had not been to this house before, but I felt like I had to get in there. So I opened the door, and I saw probably the largest guy I'd ever seen holding this woman by her neck, literally off the ground against the wall, and his back was to me. I mean, this guy had muscles in places muscles are not supposed to be. And I initially saw that, and as I was thinking about what do, I saw her eyes. And I wish everyone can understand this. When you are in fear and you are so afraid that you might die or that something is going to happen to you that is tragic, and that police officer comes in that room, it changes your eyes. You now have somebody there to take the fight for you. And that means everything. And even though I wasn't sure what I was going to do, that empowered me to take action. And as I jumped on his back and put my arm around his neck, trying to choke him to get him back, and he body slammed me a couple of times and dropped me to the ground, and I got up and I stood between her and him, and I said everything I could say to get him to think before he tore me apart. And she stood behind me and latched onto my back. But in that moment, I was her protector. So that's what we see. You don't have to motivate me or law enforcement officers that see this to care about our victims. And I know on the advocate side, you see a story through their eyes as well, through those hours and days and weeks and months that you work with them and help put a plan together and watch them become empowered and take control of their lives. That's what we share. And on the flip side of that, it has changed my life for the better. Because watching people that have been broken down and oppressed become strong and then stronger and move ahead and advance in their lives has taught me that when those things happen to me and when we're knocked down, that we can do the same thing. And it has empowered me to feel that in those moments, I can think about some of these faces and some of these individuals that have changed my life, and I can move forward. So that's the beauty of the relationship between law enforcement and victim advocates. And I want those victims to know that you have made a difference in my life. You have made me a better man, a better husband, a better father, a better friend, because I've heard your stories. And I know what can happen in the heat of the moment, unintended so many times, sometimes not, when emotions are high. And it just always has been there in my head. So thank you for what you do. I think what's happening here with our legislators, Lieutenant Governor, the governor's support, this is an amazing year for us. And I'm just happy to have a small part in that as we move victim services forward in our state. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Ross. You have seen from him, you've seen from others why this matters. To bring it from a perspective of what we do in the legislature. Article 1, Section 28 of the Utah Constitution is a declaration of the rights of crime victims to preserve, protect victims' rights to justice and due process, to have these rights defined by law, to be treated with fairness, respect, and dignity, free from harassment and abuse, to promote the criminal justice process. It's part of our Constitution in Utah. It's not just a nice thing. Yes, it's a nice thing. It's not just a good thing, and yes, it's a good thing. It's part of the constitutional duty that the people gave the charge to the legislature to do this, to protect and secure the rights and the dignity and the fairness for victims of crime. If you think about why we have government, right? I mean, why do we have government at all? We could have no government and we protect ourselves and we all are our own police force and we all carry our sword and do our job and go about our business. And somewhere along the way, people decided, you know, that's probably not very efficient. What if we all get together and we have some really conscientious, good people like Director Ross just talked about, and we have them protect the innocent? That's what government started out to be. Protect the innocent so that we can go about the things in our lives, that we can build families, that we can build communities and have a safe and thriving state. But it all starts with protecting the innocent. And that's what this is about. This effort is about bringing balance back to how we protect the innocent. For a long time, we've allowed federal funds and federal programs to drive our victim services in the state of Utah. Federal funds are drying up very rapidly, and if anyone has seen the national debt, and if anyone's seen the deficit and the things that are happening, it's probably going to continue to dry up. And so we look at how do we coordinate and synergize among all of the state agencies, and there are many of them, among all of the local agencies, and there are many of them, both in law enforcement, in the courts, in the prosecutors. How do we coordinate also among the wonderful private advocates? And how do we best synergize that effort? We haven't really taken an approach to that before. That's what the effort is about this year. It's about taking all of the wonderful pieces that are there, and they're amazing. The kind of work that is happening at UDVC, UCASA, so many of the other groups, CAPSA up in the north, so many amazing, wonderful groups. It's about taking all of that wonderful work and synergizing it, funding it appropriately, knowing that federal funding is going away, and fulfilling our obligation under our Constitution as to why we have government. Protect the innocent. And that's what we're here for today. I want to thank you. I want to thank you and all of these amazing people that are on the ground every single day working on these efforts. I've told Jen a number of times, I can't imagine how frustrating it must be every day to get up and know the standard of care. And know that if you provided that standard of care for a child, that may cost about $4,000 for a child, not only do we save $1.5 million over the life of the child in government services, but you put that child, innocent, that had no fault of their own, you put them back on the road to learning and health and productivity and growing in their family. Same thing with an adult, someone completely innocent, and we help put them back in a place where they're working with their family and their communities and moving forward. This is good policy for the state. I can't imagine what it's like to get up every day and know this is the level of service, this is the standard of care, and know how many victims there are out there, and know that you can only deliver a small fraction of what's needed to a very, very small fraction of the victims that need support. What we're doing this year is to try to close those gaps, to make sure we get closer to delivering the full standard of care and delivering that care to as many of the victims as we have in the state. This is why we have government, protect the innocent. This is why we started this whole project. I want to thank all of you that are working on the ground, that are bringing this together, that have worked to coordinate and synergize. And I feel fortunate to just have my name on the bill and an appropriation request. I'm grateful to you for all the work that you do. And if we can do things to help you do that work more efficiently, to reach more people, again, this is why we're here. This is what we do in government. Number one, protect the innocent. So thank you very much, and thank you so much for what you're doing. And let's make sure you don't have to make those hard choices of diminishing the standard to only a few of the people. Let's make sure we can care for all of those that need service in the state of Utah. So thank you very, very much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really glad to be here. Over my 50 years in education, I had the opportunity to be around a lot of situations where kids and families were really harmed through domestic violence. I'm very thankful for the efforts that everyone in this room makes to ensure that children and their parents have services that get them in the right track again. So wraparound services provided by folks like you are really amazing, and I'd like to speak to that for just a minute. A critical component of Utah's response and support for victims are the wraparound services that are provided by the 15, 16 different agencies across our state. These nonprofits in the past, on January 1st, look at their budget and it's zero. And then they have to figure out, how are we going to keep all these people who are working and providing all these services employed so that the services that kids and families need in order to become strong again can happen. So these programs like CAPSA, where I live, provide support to victims of domestic violence and assault through 24-hour, 7 days a week service. And when you think about that, I always ask this question: where would all these kids, all these men, all these women who've been battered, who have gone through trauma, where would they go? And when you think about that, it's breathtaking. So thank you for being there to rebuild the family structure. So ensuring that nonprofit-based organizations can meet the requests that they get in this 24-hour service, it is a combination of many things with the criminal justice partners, and it results really in successful outcomes for victims and their families. The wraparound services these nonprofits provide, such as transitional housing, youth advocacy, support groups, legal advocacy, have shown to increase positive outcomes for victims. And I think that investing in community-based programs that have spent decades developing appropriate practices is more critical now than ever. We are committed, I want you to know, we are committed to these well-developed programs. You've been doing this for a long, long time. Last year was the first time that there was any ongoing money provided by the legislature for domestic violence. My request for this year is 6.2 million as a part of a bigger request that Representative Ivory has put together in another part of the bill. So watch that very, very closely, advocate for that, because I know that that's going to make a big difference in the lives of children, in the lives of men and women who need this wraparound services. So thank you for what you do in making a difference in the lives of others and giving up all that you have for the care of others. It's amazing, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm Debbie Mayo. I'm the Executive Director of New Horizons Crisis Center that is located down in Richfield in South Central Utah. We provide services for 13,000 square miles from 5 counties. I just wanted to talk about making sure that the statewide focus for implementing the lethality assessment protocol and the core victim services funding doesn't forget about rural survivors and the service providers who are the direct resource to law enforcement and when they respond to domestic violence calls. We talk to people all the time that say, is there a problem down here? Yes. I love living in a rural place. It's beautiful, but domestic violence happens in rural Utah as well. And in rural Utah, there's the least amount of resources that are available. Homicides in rural communities are 3 times as likely to involve an intimate partner than in cities. A quarter of survivors in rural areas are more than 40 miles from the nearest domestic violence program. We have some areas in the area we cover that are about 2 hours from our shelter if they want to come in and receive shelter services. Reducing occurrences of domestic violence and DV homicides should be a focus and a priority, and I'm glad it is right now. But it can't happen without putting funding to those services, to get those services to survivors.
Good morning. My name is Brandon Merrill. I'm the Executive Director and founder of Utah Homicide Survivors, and I'm also a new board member of the Utah Domestic Violence Coalition. As Lieutenant Governor Henderson stated, we can't completely eliminate domestic violence. It is not, while we would like to, it is just not realistic. It is going to happen. However, our response to it is what is going to matter. Utah Homicide Survivors exists because of that need after a domestic violence homicide occurs. Many don't realize what these families need after this happens, especially in domestic violence homicides. Things like what happens to the surviving minor children? How do we take care of them physically, mentally, and financially? For Utah Homicide Survivors, our main purpose is to put that cost of the crime back on the perpetrator, back on the murderer. Since our inception in 2018, we have helped over 100 families and have recovered over $5 million in assets. That's our recovery. That is not the amount of judgments that we've gotten. That's much higher. But the amount of assets that we've recovered to go to these innocent family members, these innocent victims, and to make sure that the killer doesn't profit from their crime. I started this organization because I saw that need. I saw something that needed fulfilled within this state. Families left hopeless after an unspeakable tragedy has occurred. No one knows what these families go through. It's a club that no one should have to be a part of. Even though my entire law career has been in this area, I did not realize everything that they needed and everything that they went through until I, like Lieutenant Governor Henderson in the last few months, became a survivor myself after my cousin was killed. Our budgets for all service providers over the last 2 years have been cut by 20%, and in the next 2 years they're projecting another 30% in our cut. That is something that many organizations like myself will not survive. We will lose vital services without these appropriations and additional support from our state and local governments. These appropriation bills are a smart investment. Just the cost of homicide to Utah in the last year was over $20 million. Can you imagine what the cost of domestic violence overall as a state was if just the homicides were $20 million? For all the media, local advocates, organizations out there, I urge you to get in touch with your local legislators to get this appropriations passed at the levels that it is requested. A cut is not going to be sufficient to fund all of the need that we have here in Utah. We need this fully funded. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being up here. I can't help but thinking, when I was growing up, my mom would always say, take a heart picture. And we always thought she was just really sappy. But as an adult now, I think we had 8 kids. Who thinks to bring a camera, first of all? But also, I think really what she was saying is to take a moment and appreciate what's happening. And that is what I would ask all of you to do today, is honor my mom, take a heart picture, appreciate what's happening, appreciate the groups that are coming together, appreciate the voices that are being heard. Know that there's hope, there's help, and there's support. If you need it, reach out. This is a room full of amazing advocates. This is a group here that is advocating for you. Reach out. We're here for all of you here today, as we've been saying all day. You're enough. You're doing amazing work. Keep doing it. And we're here to help and support. Thank you for your time. Thank you for bringing your whole selves. And let's continue to do amazing work together. Appreciate it.
So for those of you who, I'm really sorry to rush us off, you all stayed on time, and some of you are real chatters, so good job staying on time, especially those legislators, they like to talk. We're going to head right over to the main Capitol building and try to talk to more of the policymakers about what you've heard this morning, so come back here for lunch at noon. Thank you all so much.
Yes.